Oh yeah, bro. Yeah. Pretty fish, boy. Look at that toad right there, boy. Look at that pretty fish right there. That thing is thick across the back, got a belly on it. All right guys, so before we jump into today's video, I gotta thank our sponsor, North Alabama, for helping make this video possible. Not only did we shoot this video in North Alabama, but it's one of my favorite places to fish, so I moved both myself and my business here. So listen guys, if you're looking to plan the ultimate fishing or outdoor adventure, head over to their website, northalabama.org, to start planning your trip today. All right guys, so I wanted to take a second and actually demonstrate on land what I'm talking about when it comes to picking a rod for fishing jigs and also for fishing Texas rig, but most specifically for fishing jigs. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to teach young Kason here a lesson about selecting a jig rod. And so to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pitch the jig out there, and if I was working this thing along the bottom and I ran into that rock, I'm going to feel it, okay? So first and foremost, you're going to get a lot more feel out of an extra fast or fast action rod because they're just that much more sensitive. And what I like to do is once I feel something, I like to give the line back a little bit. And what it does is it lets that jig relax, and then I just raise my rod tip and kind of scoot it over the top. So if you notice, that jig literally just fell right over the rock. If there was a bass sitting there, it's still in the strike zone. But here's the real reason that you go with a stiffer rod. You can make any other rod work. One is that when you set the hook on a fish on the bottom in cover, you need that extra stiffness and you need a heavy rod to turn that fish and get it away from the cover. But the biggest reason that you want that extra fast or fast action rod is because if you go with a rod similar to what Kason has here, and that rod is super flexible, as you see right there, what happens is when you get that jig on the other side of that cover, good Lord, chat. Well, that demonstrates what happens. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So when you get that jig on the other side of a piece of cover like that, and you feel it, okay, first of all, you don't have as much feel. But here's what happens when you get ready to pull. See how the rod is starting to bend? And what happens is when it pulls a loose, that jig shoots forward 6, 8, 10 feet. And I literally barely loaded the rod. So let's show that one more time. So once it binds up against that rock, okay, as I start to pull it over, if you notice, as that rod starts to flex, I'm not able to move the jig because I don't have enough power in the rod, and when it pops loose, it shoots forward. The biggest problem is when it shoots forward, oh good Lord. The biggest problem is when it shoots forward and you encounter like a tree limb or something, you'll end up getting this situation like this where it just oh Lord. You'll end up getting this situation like this where, good God, Chad. I can't, see, I'm so good I can't hang up even when I want to. So what happens is when you start to pull a lure, a jig especially, across a piece of cover or structure with a moderate action rod, what ends up happening is the rod loads to give you enough power to pull the lure over, and then it jumps 6, 8, 10 feet in some cases. But more importantly, it jumps forward. And if you're in a treetop or something, when it shoots forward, it's going to wrap around a tree limb. And that's what causes, honestly, about 90% of the hang-ups or snags that you can't get out of. If you hang up against a rock or something that you're just caught against the edge of it, you can always take your kayak and go around the other side and pull it out. But when you get hung up and you pull it and you feel it snap loose and then it does that Indiana Jones wrap around the tree, you're not getting that thing loose. So first and foremost, the action is better for feeling the bottom. The power of a fast, extra fast, heavy rod is going to give you that power to turn that fish and get it moving away from the cover. And more importantly, you're not going to end up against the wall back here, because if you have to go real deep and set the hook and the rod bends, now you're up here. When that fish starts running at you, you're up against the wall and you've got nowhere to go. And then last but not least, and this is probably a big part of why people lose so many fish on jigs, is you get up against the wall right here when you're fighting the fish. If that fish ever jumps, what happens is as soon as it jumps, your rod straightens out. Once your rod straightens out, and if it's got that jig even slightly outside the mouth, when it shakes its head, the weight of the lure helps throw it. So every jig fisherman has had a big fish jump, shake their head, and throw the lure on them. If you haven't been jig fishing enough. But one of the best ways to get rid of that is to keep that rod out in front of you, keep a bend in it, and use angles But really, a fast, extra fast rod will solve a lot of that, because you'll have the power to control the fish, and you'll have a lot less bow in the rod, and the fish won't be able to get you back against that wall and put you at a disadvantage. Now, if you don't have a fast, extra fast rod, what you really need to do when it comes to especially catching the fish is reel down level with the water and set the hook so you still keep the rod out in front of you, and then change angles and just understand that you're at a little bit of a disadvantage. Now, the one downside, if you want to call it that, to a fast, extra fast rod, especially when it comes to fishing a jig, is because you have a little bit more power and because you have less flex in the rod, you will tear a little bit bigger hole in the fish's mouth if you lip hook it. And so in that case, you really have to stay on a fish. And so when it comes to jig fishing, probably more so than anything else out there, because you only have a single hook, and you're going to tear a hole, and then the weight is forward of the hook. So when the fish shakes its head, the weight of the lure is helping throw it. Is you have to stay on your angles. A lot of people don't realize this, but everybody that goes fishing is a fisherman. The people that do really well at it are anglers. And the reason that anglers are called anglers is because they use the angles. So when you're fishing a jig, it's all about the angles. Whichever way you see that fish moving, set the hook and go the opposite direction. If that fish starts running and you feel it in line, change and turn the other direction. Keeping the fish at a disadvantage will put you at the advantage. But if you constantly go with the fish, you're going to end up with a lot of like, oh, right at the boats. You're going to end up with a lot of those fish that are jumping, shaking their head, and throwing the lure on you. So a heavy power, fast or extra fast action rod, the longer the better in my opinion, because length actually also helps you by having a little bit more leverage and line take up. And again, I love an extra fast reel because it helps me keep up with the fish or stay ahead of the fish, and it helps me manage my presentation a lot better by having more line take up. I don't necessarily buy into the concept that you need torque from your reel when you're jig fishing. The torque on the fish when you're jig fishing comes from your arm and the rod. That's where you put the torque on the fish. You're just trying to keep up with the reel, and so an extra fast, in this case a Shimano Corrado XG, is my choice when it comes to jig fishing. So anyway, hope that helps. Oh yeah, bro. Yeah. Come on. That is a pretty fish, boys and girls. Look at that thing. Yeah. Got over here out of the wind and went to the black jig on Kason's advice because it was working. And honestly, in Alabama, black and blue always works, but look at that toad right there, boy. We're gonna get a picture of this one. I mean, a picture on the measuring board. Yeah, this one don't suck. A little over 19. I like it when they just lay there for the camera like that. This one must be like a nude model. I like it when they lay there for the camera like that. Man, look at that pretty fish right there. That thing is thick across the back, got a belly on it. Jigs just catch big fish, man. They just do.